Hi everyone, Mike again with MEG Motors. We're going to do something a little bit different today. I recently purchased two of these Weed Eater GHT22 hedge trimmers. They haven't run in a long time. I got them from the same guy. I gave $30 for the pair of them, so $15 in each one. What I want to do is I'm going to take one of them and I'm going to do a repair video where we talk about what's wrong with it and go through step by step how to fix it. And then on the other one, I'm just going to time the repair and see how long it takes me to fix it with no distractions. My goal is to see if I can fix the second one in 30 minutes or less. So we're going to do a quick evaluation of them. We're going to do a start on spray test on both of them to make sure that they're both at least candidates for restore before we start those two videos. And if they are, we're going to get started on the first one. We're going to walk through the repair on that one, and then we'll do a timed repair on the next one. So let's get the air cleaner covers off. We'll run a test, see if they start on spray, and then we'll get started. Alright, so I have the air filter covers removed from both of them. We're going to see if we can get them to start on spray. Like we've talked about before, we need three things to make these small engines run. We need spark, and we need the spark at the right time. We need compression, and we need fuel. I pulled the starters through on both of these and they feel like they have enough compression to run. I can already see that there's fuel problems. We have broken fuel lines and broken primers. But we're going to run a spray test. We'll shoot a little carburetor cleaner in the carburetor and see if we can get them to attempt to start on carburetor cleaner. If they do, we know that we have spark and spark at the right time, and we have compression. So on this first one, we're going to go with the choke open and the throttle open. We're going to spray a little bit of spray in there, and then I'm going to lock the throttle open. Turn the switch on, and we're going to pull it through and see what happens. Alright, so that one fired off, so we know that we have spark at the right time, and we have compression. Let's see what happens with the second one. Same thing, we're going to go choke open, throttle open, shoot a spray, switch is on, we're going to lock the throttle open. Let's see if this one will go. Alright, so that one started too. Alright, so we have two candidates for repair. At least we know we don't have major mechanical issues or ignition issues. So we're going to put this one aside. We're going to go through a repair on this one, and then we'll do our time test on this one. So doing just a look over on this one, I can see that the primer, which should be right here, is completely gone. So it's rotted away completely. Here's our fuel lines, also rotten. These are very small fuel lines too. The interesting thing is the fuel lines. So here's our fuel tank. I can see fuel lines inside. The interesting thing is our fuel lines go in through here, down through the handle. So we're going to have to disassemble. This handle to get fuel lines reinstalled on these. So that may be an interesting challenge. We'll see how that goes. So first thing first, we're going to pull the carburetor off of this one. We're going to open it up. Obviously we're going to have to put a primer on it, and I'm sure we're going to have to put some other parts in there, and we'll see if we can get that carburetor cleaned up and ready to go. So to get started on this one, we're going to pull the carburetor off of it, and we're going to open up this handle and see what we're going to have to deal with to get those fuel lines on there. So it's interesting on this one, it's old enough that the bolts are actually SAE instead of metric. We don't see that very often anymore, but they are on this one. All right, so there's our air filter off. And we'll unplug our throttle cable, and then I'm just going to break the fuel line here. Those are so rotten. I don't think they're going to come off. Huh, it did come off. All right, so there's our carburetor. We'll clean that up a little bit and then we'll open it up. It looks to be a Walbro, which is good. It's a good brand name carburetor. So we'll open it up, see what's going on inside, and see what we got to do to make it work again. Put a new primer on it. But before we do that, I want to open up this handle and get an idea of what we're going to get into when we try to put fuel lines on this one. Alright, so hopefully you can see the fuel lines where they turn and go into the tank right there. So that might not be too bad. This one has one screw that's partially taken loose right there for some reason, and it has a fuel line trapped behind it. So I have to look at that too. Alright, so I'm gonna clean up that carburetor, and we're gonna take it apart and see what's going on in there, and then we'll come back and put some fuel lines on this. Alright, let's get started on this carburetor. Like I said, this is a Walbro WT. These carburetors are pretty cool, diaphragm style carburetor. It has both a fuel pump on this side and a metering chamber on this side that meters fuel into the engine. They operate in any attitude, upside down, right side up, it doesn't matter. Unlike a traditional float bowl carburetor that only works right side up, these will work in any angle or position, which is why we have to have them on things like hedge trimmers where you want to run them sideways. So we're going to open up the fuel pump side first and see what's going on in there. So on the fuel pump side, we need to see this diaphragm right here. This diaphragm is moved back and forth by crankcase pulses from the engine, and that's used to pump fuel along with these two flaps right here, which are one-way valves, and they seem to be stuck. Those need to be free to move and lift up and down off of. There's a hole underneath each one of them, and they need to lift up off of those holes to allow fuel to come through. So those are stuck. So I'm going to try to peel this the gasket and the diaphragm off of there and see what's going on. Hopefully we can get that off without tearing it up. There we go. Alright, and so for the fuel pump diaphragm, we need this membrane here to be relatively soft and flexible, and we need these two flaps to be soft and flexible. And actually these are really, really hard. So I don't think these are going to work anymore. I'll have to look and see if I have the right parts in my spares to see if I have the right membranes for this. But yeah, that's not going to work. If not, I'll have to order a kit for this carburetor, and I'll order two if I do, so we'll have one for the other one when we do the time test. Alright, so inside here we need this all to be clean, and this screen right here is where fuel is sent from the fuel pump side over to the metering chamber side for use by the engine. So we're going to go ahead and open up the metering side and see what's going on that side. So we know, of course, that we need a primer. Here's what's left of our primer. it's just crumbling apart. So need a new primer. I'm gonna pop this primer chamber off, and then so this is our metering diaphragm. This is another critical part of this carburetor. This metering diaphragm is what controls the needle and seat that allows fuel to come into this side of the carburetor. And I can already tell you, I can see this one it's slammed shut, or slammed down as hard as it can, and so this would never work. This would flood the carburetor. I'm going to try to get this side apart too and see if we can get that off without breaking anything. Yeah, so here's our metering diaphragm. That needs to be very soft and flexible, and it's hard as a rock. So, and we've torn the gasket. So we're gonna definitely need some parts on this one. I'll have to look at my spares and see if I have the right parts. This one's pretty nasty inside. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna take this screw out and see if we can get the needle out, the metering arm and the needle out, and see how those are looking, and then see what else we might have to do to make this carburetor work. So when you take this screw out, you want to hold your thumb over the metering lever because it is spring loaded, and that spring will go flying, and it's pretty small, so I don't know if you'd ever find it again if you ever lose it. Alright, so here's our needle. It should have the tip on this should be orange on this one, and you can see it's silver. So that's all tarnish and dirt and stuff on the needle. We'll have to clean that up for sure. Although if we end up having to buy a kit for it, it'll come with a new needle. Alright, let me go check my spares and see what I have available for parts for this one, and we'll see if we have what we need to put it back together. Alright, so let's work on putting some fuel lines on this one. It's got really small fuel lines, but that's one of the sizes that you get when you order the 4-size kit that you can buy on Amazon or eBay. You can buy a kit that comes with 4 different sizes of lines, and this small size here is one of the sizes that you'll get. We don't use it very often. I don't see this size very often, but sometimes you do, and it's in use on this one for sure. So first thing we need to do is get the old lines out of there. They're really hard. I'm going to cut them off and push them inside the tank, and then see if I can get them to come up out of the tank. So just cut those off. I'll use my pick to push the end back inside the tank. Alright, there's one. There's the fuel pickup line. Let's see what else we got in there. And then here's the return line. So it has this little fitting on here. We've seen these before. This is just used to swell the end of the line for the return line so that it doesn't get pulled back out of the tank. So we'll cut the line off of this and we'll reuse that on the new line. The first thing we need to do is get the old fuel line off of this fuel pickup. And that line is really, really hard. So I'm just going to use a knife and I'm going to cut down the side of the line and see if we can get that line to come off of there. There we go. That came off okay. So looking at this pickup, I can see that it's actually plugged up. You can see that the end of the pickup right there is plugged up. So I think I've got some extra fuel pickup, so we'll put a new pickup in the tank on this one. But let's go ahead and pull some lines into the tank. Let's see what's going on here. So on this one, it actually looks like we have two different size lines. I'm not sure if you can see that in the camera, but this line is bigger than this line. So I'm not sure which line was originally bigger. They looked like they were the same size. But this line is going to be too small for the big hole. So it'll be the right size for the return, but we'll put a bigger hose on the fuel pickup. Let's go ahead and see if we can pull this small hose in. I'm going to stick my, oh, look at that. My tool won't fit in there. We're going to have to try to see if we can work this hose in by hand. Just going to put a little lube on the end. Let's see if we can work this hose into the tank. We have gotten it started in there. I'm going to reach in with a pair of needle nose pliers and see if I can pull it in a little bit further. Alright, so here's our return line. I'm going to try to cut the fuel line off of this piece as well so we can reuse that. There we go, we got the fuel line off of that. So again, this piece isn't critical, so if it breaks or it's missing, it's not the end of the world, but if we have it, it's good to put it on. So I'm going to cut this line off square. It's just a touch of lube. Get them on, then we can pull this line back until that fitting comes up against the top of the tank, and then we know that's good. So we know we're going to need a fair bit of line on this one, so we're going to measure it out and just cut off with plenty of excess. Alright, I need to go grab a different size line for the rest of this, so I'll be right back. Okay, so here we are with the larger fuel line size that we need for this second fitting. So we're going to cut a diagonal on this one, just like that. And we're going to pre-poke a hole in it with this. Makes it easier to get on our tool. We're going to feed this tool in through the gas tank. just a little bit of lubricant on there. We're going to pull that back up through the tank. It's fitting pretty tight. Again, we're going to pull up some extra, so we know we got to come all the way over here to the carburetor. We're going to cut off our fuel line. And then I need to go find another fuel pickup. Alright, so I found this pickup in my list of spares, in my box of spares, so we're going to put this one on the fuel pickup line. And we're going to feed that down into the tank. Once we get it in there, we'll just pull this line back until we think we have the right length of hose in the tank. Alright, there we go. So our new fuel lines are in place. We need to finish putting the carburetor back together and mount it back up, and we'll be ready to see if this one runs. Alright, so our parts came in for our carburetor. We're going to work on putting this one back together. Doesn't really matter which side we start with. We're going to start with the fuel pump side. So this is the fuel pump side. These are our new parts from the kit. They're going to replace, this looks like one piece, but it's actually two pieces. It's a fuel pump membrane on one side and a gasket on the other side. And so we're going to put this part together first, and it's important that this membrane goes on first. We can get a little bit of dirt off of that there in just a minute. So this membrane, these little flaps that we talked about when we took this apart, these pieces right here, they actually lay on top of these holes and seal those off like one-way valves. So when this is in place right here, for this hole right here, fuel can come up out of the hole, but it can't go back down. And so it's important that this piece be in the right place so all of that works. And then this gasket goes on top right there. Again, we have to make sure that those flaps are not encumbered by the gasket. As that piece goes on, and then this is the cover that goes over our fuel pump. And we got to hold the throttle open when you set this in place, because the idle screw hits the throttle right there and it won't let it go on. So that puts our fuel pump together. We're going to put the screw back in. And on the other side we have our new needle. It did come with a new needle, that's good. We're going to put that in the slot. It came with a It actually came with a new spring, but the spring was a different size, and the spring is pretty important, so I elected to use the old spring. So we're going to put the old spring back in place and set all that together on the carburetor. We have a new metering arm, and if you look at the arm, you can see that it's got a protrusion right here on the arm that goes over the spring. The spring goes around that bump, so that has to go down. So we're going to put that on the shaft. Then I'll set it down on the spring and then work it under the needle. And then once we get all that in place, we can look from the side, and hopefully you can see that that spring is in place. So we'll put the screw back in that holds all that together. And then we need to put our, so then we need to use this tool. This is a metering lever gauge that we need to use to set the metering lever on this carburetor. So this is especially important if you replace the metering lever. Most of the time the old ones are adjusted correctly, and so to use this tool, we're going to look at the side of our carburetor here, and we can read the number right here. It says it's WT. And so we look on our gauge and we see all these numbers around the gauge, and we find one that says WT, which is right here on this gauge. So we're going to use this part right here to gauge our metering lever. So we set that right there on the carburetor, and we can see, hopefully you can see that. This one is a long way away from the gauge, so we're going to have to bend that metering lever arm up a considerable amount to make this right. And so what we want is for that metering lever to just barely touch the gauge. Yeah, I got that right on the first try. So that's good right there. Let me recheck that. No, it needs to come up a little bit more. All right, so that shows that it's set right. But I'm a little concerned because if you watch this mechanism, I'm not sure you can see it, when I push the lever down, oh, I thought it wasn't raising the needle, but actually it's not. So even though it's set correctly, it doesn't appear that it's raising the needle. And so I'm a little concerned that if we put that in this way that it might not work. It's unloading the needle for sure. So hopefully the fuel pump pressure will be enough to still bring fuel into the chamber. So the way this works, when this metering diaphragm is on top of the carburetor, on top of this chamber, as the engine pulls fuel, normally this chamber is full of fuel, as the engine pulls fuel out of this chamber, it'll pull this diaphragm down until the button on the diaphragm contacts the lever and unloads the seat, which will let fuel flow from the fuel pump side into this chamber and refill it with fuel. And as it fills with fuel, it'll push the diaphragm away, the lever will rise, and the needle will seat, and will keep from flooding our carburetor. All right, so we're going to put this back together. I'm a little concerned about the way this is working, but we'll see. If it doesn't run when we get done, we'll have a good idea where to look, I think. Check that one more time. Yeah, it's set correctly. And so on this side, the gasket goes on first, and then the metering diaphragm goes on with the metal disc pointed down. Then our primer. And I've already put a new primer bulb in the carrier here, so we're going to put that back on here, and we'll put our screws back in. Alright. There's our carburetor back together. Let's get this put back on the trimmer and see if it'll pump fuel and run. Alright, so we're going to work on putting the carburetor back on this one and closing this back up. We'll trim the fuel lines to length and put the handle back together, and then we'll be ready to do a test start, I think. So I'm going to hook the throttle cable up first. I'm going to set our carburetor in place, and then slide the air filter housing All right, and then we need to get our fuel lines cut to length and terminated. So this is the line that pushes fuel back into the tank, and this is the line that pulls fuel out of the tank. So we'll clip this one off right about here. Put that up on this fitting. And this one we're going to clip off right here. All right. Now here's our throttle mechanism, and this is the lock mechanism that stops the throttle from coming up before you press the release. I'll put all that back in place. You should be able, the fuel lines, there's a slot right here in the housing, and the fuel lines have to go through that slot. And we'll set this on top. And our throttle cable goes on right here. All right, put our fuel filter foam back in, and we'll put our cover on. All right, so that completes the reassembly. We will put some gas in it and we'll see if it'll start up. All right, so it's raining here today outside, so we're going to do a test start here inside the shop. First thing we're going to do, we're going to pump the primer bulb and see if we can see fuel coming through the lines. Hopefully you can see this as I pump. There's fuel coming up this line. You should see it go back down the other line. There it goes. Took a little while, but it's gone. All right, so we're gonna go to full choke. We're gonna turn the switch on. Gonna lock the throttle partially open. And we're gonna give it a few pulls, see if it'll run. Nothing so far. A few more pumps on the primer. Still at full choke. We'll take us off a choke and see if it'll do anything. All right, so no start. So we're gonna have to try something different. I'm gonna pull the air filter cover and we're gonna put a prime in there and see if that helps us get it started. All right, so I pulled the air filter cover. We're gonna shoot a prime in there and see if that'll get it started. We shouldn't have to do this. It should start on its own, but it doesn't seem to want to, so let's see what happens. So switch is on and throttle's locked open. All right, so something is still not right with this one. We're gonna have to take it back into the shop and see if we can figure out what's going on. So we have the carburetor back off of this one, and I suspect, like I saw when we were overhauling this carburetor that the needle is not lifting, and so we're going to open the metering chamber side and see if we see fuel in the metering chamber. Well, there's our metering chamber, and while it has a little bit of fuel in it, it doesn't have very much. So I'm going to pull the old metering lever out of the parts that I took off, and we're going to put that one in there and see if it looks better on here. Alright, so I put the original metering lever back in the carburetor. It did appear that it lifts the needle better than the replacement that came in the kit. So we're going to go ahead and give this another try, see if we can get to start. So back to full choke, we pump the primer, switch is on, throttle is open. Let's see if it'll do anything. That sounded better already. The idle is set too low, so we'll turn that up a little bit. Still doesn't seem to want to idle. Maybe idling too rich. I'm going to lean it out a little bit. Let's see if we can get it to start again. Alright, that sounds pretty good. We need a little adjustment on the carburetor. I don't know how many people have messed with it before we got it in the shop here, but high-speed needle was a little too lean and the low-speed needle was a little too rich, so it didn't want to idle. But it seems to be idling now, starts easy and runs good. So I think we're done with this one. Like I said in the beginning, we're going to do a two-part challenge. I have another one just like this, and so we're going to try to do a speed repair on that one and see how quickly we can get it running again. But for now, this one's done, so I hope you liked the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. And check my playlist. There's lots of other videos out there for other small engine repair, and we'll see you next time.